2002, I was raped by a United States military serviceman. I didn't want any other person to suffer like I did. Why the Japanese government hasn't changed the status of forces agreement? My name is Catherine Jane Fisher, and I have been in Japan since the 1980s. I came here to Japan with my father as he was working for a Japanese company as a common bengoshi, right? So as a lawyer here. And so then in 2002, I was raped by a United States military serviceman. When I became a rape victim in Japan, I thought going to the Japanese police, they're going to save me because these Americans raped me. But when I went to the Japanese police at Kanagawa, I was thrown into another hell, treated like a criminal. And to me, this was not Japan. Why were these policemen acting like this? This was not the Japanese way. The Japanese way is so humble and treating people with respect. So I was confused. Are you Japanese, these people at Kanagawa? Maybe they're not Japanese. I couldn't understand. They were protecting the American servicemen instead of protecting me. So it's like I fell into a dark hole, and it took me years to try and get out of there. I have trauma by Japanese police, so I will never forget that for the rest of my life. When the man who raped me, he fled the country during my court trial. And I asked the Japanese government to help me, and they said no, they couldn't. And this was because of Article 16 of the Status of Forces Agreement, which is the t-shirt that I'm wearing today. And Article 16 says, respect the laws of Japan. And the Japanese government said, well, it doesn't say obey, so we can't do anything. Sorry. So that meant I had to look for the rapist by myself for 10 years. When the Japanese government told me that they could not even afford to help me bring the perpetrator back to Japan, they can't even afford a postage stamp or a telephone call. And I studied so much, and I realized that Article 16 is the problem. From respect the laws of Japan to obey the laws of Japan. And also, not only the Status of Forces Agreement needs to be amended, but also the Japanese police have to stop second raping the victims. The American military needs to have training of their personnel. And I think they need to have screening tests of people before they come to Japan. I was so surprised that there were so many victims in Japan of crimes and incidents, murders and rapes. The Japanese government is doing nothing to stop the crimes. Since 1945, since the US landed in Japan during the war, since then these crimes have happened. So it is not only the responsibility of the Japanese government to talk to the US military, they must take action to eradicate the crimes happening in Japan. I began writing the crimes on sheets. So you can see here, 1945, a 50-year-old man is shot to death while he is trying to save his wife, who is being raped by United States military. The crimes continued happening and happening for so long. And like every month, I know about all of these crimes. And so does the Japanese government. The Japanese government knows. The American military know. How can they sleep at night knowing about all of these crimes? All of these people who were victims are not numbers. They are not numbers. These are people, real people. The perpetrators are able to flee Japan due to the Status of Forces Agreement, Article 16, which allows them to evade accountability. So I decided to speak at the United Nations, which I have been doing since 2007. And this time I wanted to show how this is not only an issue for Japan, it is a cross-border issue. Because I feel that if more crimes happening in the US or in other places of the world, that means that Japan did nothing to stop the perpetrators from fleeing Japan. Legal action could be taken from people from other countries towards Japan. Time lost means lost lives. And so now the United Nations, I've asked for their help, and I've asked them to send somebody here to investigate these crimes. 22 years ago, that means the people who were babies at that time are now adults. I did it for the next generation. I didn't want any other person to suffer like I did, and I wanted to help the people of Japan who for 80 years have suffered at the hands of the United States military. My father, when I told him I was raped in 2002, for the past 20 years he helped me. He helped me with my website and helped me so much. And just before the 20th anniversary, my father died. And so that was really hard because my father was, doing this advocacy together with me. And, sometimes when we take action like this, we have to understand that sometimes we walk alone. And there are so many victims in Japan who have been so alone for so long. And so I am their voice, because there's only one voice, it's mine in Japan. There's no other victim who has come forward because they are afraid. Breaking the silence in Japan, back then, there was so much stigma attached to victims. I wasn't afraid to say that I was a rape victim because I did nothing wrong. I'm a victim. So I should never be ashamed. But I was scared. I didn't know what would happen to me because I was a whistleblower. But now, no, I'm not scared. Breaking the silence in Japan was for Japan. It was a tough decision. Like in my life, there's been so many tough decisions, but I've never regretted any decision. I love Japan, and so that's the reason why I can keep going. The most important thing I'd like to point out is that why does Japan have to have intervention from the United Nations before they take action? They have had ample opportunity to change this by themselves. That was saddening that the Japanese government has to have somebody tell them what to do. They need to do it by themselves. And that is why I am counting on Mr. Ishiba to take action this time. Next year, it will be 80 years. So for 80 years, women have been murdered and raped. Babies and children have been murdered and raped. Men have been beaten. Taxi drivers have been hit over the head with bottles. And why the Japanese government hasn't changed the Status of Forces Agreement? Well, I do hope that when the president has been elected, that Prime Minister of Japan will be able to meet with the president. And I hope the United States military will take action by listening to the President of the United States. The new Prime Minister will convey what needs to be done to the American new president.